Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show this week in WordPress and CES. In this week's show, got a returning guest. We got Kevin Geary from Digitalgravy, a popular trainer, influencer, web designer, entrepreneur, outspoken critic of Gutenberg and where it's going. I think he would be okay with that part as well. We're going to be discussing a bit of a kind of explosion of frustration that occurred when the latest update 6.6 hit. Some of the biggest influencers in the WordPress space seemed to just had enough, and they were quite outspoken, even more than me, and even in some ways more outspoken than Kevin. It was a subject that I had got a bit bored with because I couldn't see, but I think it's something that, because of this outpouring of resentment towards Gutenberg from other sources, I thought it was best to get a true expert back on the show and have a discussion. So, Kevin, would you like to give the tribe a quick intro about you and what you do?
Sure. I am a software developer and I have a team. We develop Automatic CSS, which is a CSS framework and workflow tool for WordPress page builders, specific WordPress page builders, I should say. We also have a frames add-on, which is a kind of like a rapid fire layout system. No design opinions, just gets you to the wireframing phase as quickly as possible, and then you get to do the fun part of web design, which is making it pretty from there. But everything is responsive and flexible and built with automatic CSS, and so it does 60 to 70% of the work for you. And I'm also an educator. I have a YouTube channel, and I try my best to teach what we would refer to as best practices in modern web design using WordPress and page builders.
That's great. And I've got my great co-host, Kurt. Kurt, would you like to introduce yourself to the new listeners and viewers?
Yeah, Kurt Van Anen. We have a small agency called Mañana No Mas. We focus largely on membership and learning websites, work directly with WP-Tonic and the good folks at Lifter LMS.
In this interview, we're going to be discussing, is it possible to build something that's reasonably satisfactory to a very broad audience, almost 40% plus of websites run on WordPress? Is it possible to build something like Gutenberg that can satisfy the needs of such a diverse group of people? We're going to be discussing intrinsic design applied to Gutenberg and maybe some of the problems there, and a lot more. But before we go into the meat and potatoes of this great discussion, I've got some messages from our major sponsors. We will be back in a few moments, folks.
Hi there, e-commerce store owner. At Omnisend, we help more than 100,000 e-commerce customers just like you sell their products. We're an all-in-one email and SMS marketing platform that helps you reach your customers, grow your audience, and increase sales. In fact, our customers have seen incredible results with Omnisend, averaging $72 in revenue for every single dollar spent. And if you ever have a question, our award-winning customer support team is available 24/7 every single day. That's one of the reasons we have more than 6,000 glowing reviews and ratings all across the web. So get started with Omnisend today and start growing your business with better email and SMS marketing.
We're coming back, folks. Like to point out we've got some great special offers from the major sponsors, plus a curated list that's aimed at the WordPress professional and power user. To get all these goodies, all you have to do is go over to wp-tonic.com/deals, wp-tonic.com/deals, and you'll find all the goodies there, my beloved tribe. What more could you ask for? Probably a lot more, but that's all you're going to get from that page. Sorry to disappoint. I've made a career of it. Get used to it. So, Kevin, like I said in the intro, and I think we've touched this particular point, but when you first came on the show, it's driving 40% or more of the internet, WordPress. Gutenberg is really at the core of the future of WordPress. But in your own mind, is it possible to build something that can meet the fundamental needs of such a diverse community, Kevin?
It really just depends on what that community needs to do with the tool. I think it's possible. We can look at iOS on Apple devices, and obviously everybody uses that. But it's a specific limited range of things people are trying to do typically, right? And it's a very opinionated environment. In web design, there's a lot of different kinds of sites people are trying to build with a lot of different kinds of requirements and a lot of different skill levels. There's a lot of different decisions that need to be made about all of these things. And so the challenge is much greater. I would never say that the best way to start off with software development of any kind is to define a target market of everybody. Typically, when you're creating software, you would define a specific target market and you would build the software for that specific target market. And I know we have talked about this before in the past, but we'll rehash it just a little bit. There are two environments that we're really talking about here. We're talking about a hosted environment, like a Wix, Squarespace type environment. And then we're talking about a fully open source. You own all your data. You install WordPress on a private server, WordPress.org, right? This is already a technical environment to some degree, much more technical right out of the gate than something like a Wix or a Squarespace. And so it assumes that the user is a little bit more technical. So the idea that we would build the editing environment for the most basic of users, to me, is a mismatch right out of the gate, because the most basic of users would not be installing WordPress on their own server and doing the things that are required with WordPress.org, with no onboarding of any kind to speak of, and the chaos of just having the wild, wild west of themes and plugins and all of this other stuff going on. It's already a mismatch. So the idea that we're building for everyone software in a platform that already isn't really for everybody, we need to solve that first.
Yeah, I see your point. Because obviously with the SaaS competition like Wix and Squarespace, and then you've had some more agency professional SaaS platforms on the market, but recently you got interesting move with Wix, because Wix have got their Wix Studio, and they seem to be throwing some serious money at influencers and people on the internet in general to promote it. They've offered me some serious money. I'm still thinking about it because I'm so easily bribable, Kevin. What's your views about what Wix is up to?
I haven't used it personally in a very long time. I kind of wrote them off a while back. I don't tend to use software that lies to you, like in advertising. I feel like Wix, I call it the Wix lie. Like they're the ones primarily running the commercials, promoting this idea that anybody can build a website. Anybody can create a website. You can create a website in 5 minutes. Haven't you heard, Jonathan, with Wix? These are the ads. This is the narrative of the ads, right? So that's a lie. It's not true in the slightest. Even if you use their AI tool or their pre-made layouts and pre-made design sets and all of this, you're getting to a website that's most likely not going to do anything for your business. Now, if you're just, I use the joke of my mom all the time. Like if my mom comes to me and says, Kevin, I really need a website for my bunco club, then of course I'm going to send her to Wix. I choose a template. Like it doesn't matter. It's inconsequential. But if we're talking about a business owner who has a real business, who really wants that business to grow, going to Wix and using their AI builder or their 5-minute, fill out this template thing, that's not going to do them any good at the end of the day anyway. So even if they do what the commercial says, which they can't, and we know this because Wix users all the time come to agencies and say, I tried to do it myself and I wasted 3 to 5 days of my life and now I want you to do it, right? That's like a huge source of where agencies get business. So it's not true. It's promoting a false narrative. And when you lie about your software, I tend to not want to use your software. So I just don't know a lot about the Wix platform in 2024.
Right, before I throw you over to Kirk, I've got one follow-up question. I was just surprised at this outpouring that seemed to come out of nowhere from, from Paul of WP-Tuts, a very fair individual in my opinion, in some ways more fairer than me. I can be a bit abrasive or blunt when I want to be, which is quite often. And then we got Adam, and I've always got on Adam from WP Crafter. That's probably one of the biggest influencers still in WordPress.
Yeah.
A very astute business mind, somebody that I get on with fine. Some people don't, but I get on with him okay. But he doesn't normally go into negativity. But his latest video, to say it was brutal about Gutenberg and about the basic situation would be the understatement of the century. It was really brutal stuff. Have you contemplated why? Because it seemed the Gutenberg propagandists and central control seemed to be getting what they wanted, but then out of nowhere, you had this outpouring. You got any? I can't work out where it came from suddenly. Really,
I don't know where it came from either, other than we've been trending that direction. I myself have been, like you said in your intro, an outspoken critic of Gutenberg for a while now, and with good reason. And I don't know if people hear somebody say that and then, okay, I guess I feel okay chiming in too. I don't really know what's going on. I think it's good though. I think Gutenberg needs more discussion about the faults with it. I actually think that Gutenberg is you mentioned the 6.6 update. I think that was the version number. I actually don't pay all that much attention to it because I'm not affected by it because I don't use it. So but what I'm constantly told by the Gutenberg crowd and the block editor crowd and the close to core crowd, that's what I always get. You got to be close to core. Why do you have to be close to core? Well, I mean, they're not going to break your sites. I mean, it's close to core. Like a page builder, bricks could go haywire and your sites just break overnight. And I'm like, okay, well, all right, that's an argument. But then WordPress 6.6 happens or whatever, and I see people on Twitter it broke my site. It broke my and I just reply like this. I don't think it's possible because I've just been told endlessly that this doesn't happen when you're close to core. So something's got to be wrong, right? Of course, I'm poking fun, but this is the thing. Like we have to get rid of these narratives that because it's the block editor, nothing bad is ever going to happen. Because it's the block editor, it's naturally going to be successful. Because it's in my argument has been, because it's another thing people say, oh, bricks could disappear overnight. Well, so could the block editor. So could let's talk about that. So could the block editor. They could get to a point because they're struggling. I mean, we're 7 years in. It's still a struggle. It's a struggle to get people to adopt it. It's a struggle to use it. And they could get to a point where they say, guys, this was the concept. We tried our best at it. We couldn't get it adopted. We couldn't get it over the hump. We couldn't get it to the finish line where it needed to be. And it has too much technical debt now. And it's just too expensive for us to keep trying to push this thing on people. We're going to go back to being the best possible CMS. That might be a pivot they make. We don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. It's possible, though. What I think we need to stop doing is putting out this narrative that because it's native, it's going to be successful. It's going to be around forever and everybody should use it, regardless of all of the obvious problems that it has.
Yeah, I'm not quite as critical as you are, Kevin, of it. I think there has to be an understanding of its flaws, and I actually think its flaws could be dealt with in a reasonable period of time. That less than a year. Actually, I would want to get it sorted out in less than 6 months.
Do you think that's technically possible?
I think you could make it a lot better. This is only my opinion, Kevin. There's certain things that we're not aware of that are driving, but they've got a bad usability UX situation, and they're just adding more functionality to a bad scenario, which is, by doing that, makes the basic scenario even worse. Your criticism goes deeper around how the output and their decisions about using JSON and other things, and your criticisms are even deeper than mine. Mine's a more UX usability criticism. I'm not saying that your criticisms are not shouldn't be listened to, but you've got to start somewhere. So, Kurt, over to you.
I feel like I need to step back a few minutes because, Kevin, you've mentioned a couple of times use case, and I was trying to study for this interview, and I heard you say use case on WDD Live a couple of times. I think it's super important, and it's one of my catchphrases when I do the live stuff with Lifter. So use case to me is huge, and I think about my own journey, and it's like I'm more of an implementer than a developer. So, I'll get something, load up WordPress, and now we've got one-click installs from all these different hosts. So the tech load isn't that heavy to say, okay, well, I want to do WordPress instead of Wix because they can click a button and they got it. But where I get the use case confusion, and bear with the length of the question, please, but it's, I've done the classic editor, I've done the blocks thing, I'm growing with blocks with them. Then full site editing rolls out and confuses the crud out of me for a month. I tried to get strong in Elementor. I tried Bricks. I actually successfully launched a Bricks website last week. So where does the use case come from for people that are like, they want to do one step more than core? Like they use the block editor, they use a template, they want to just tweak some things. What do you think is that use case that takes them over the edge and says, I need an Elementor, I need a Bricks, I need an automatic CSS? What trips them over that?
I think what trips them over that is aspirations, like aspirations to do work at bigger scale or more projects, right? Be an agency, be a legit freelancer doing work for companies and wanting to have this control over what they're doing. I mean, let's talk about going from, because you said you're more of an implementer than like maybe a developer, right? So one argument I've made, and I have a free course called Page Building 101 that anybody can do, and it actually is for this purpose, right? It's basically saying, hey, do you essentially have like page assembly skills, but you really don't know how the underlying stuff is working, right? You don't really know the CSS, you don't really know the HTML, but you really want to level up your game because you do consider yourself to be a professional and you want to be confident in what you're doing, right? That's who Page Building 101 is for. And I made the argument in that you are far better off learning web design, the language of modern web design, in a tool like Bricks or like Oxygen or like any of these fully featured page builders than anywhere else. And then even over Elementor and Divi and so on. And the reason being is because Elementor, Divi, and the block editor, we can put them all in the same category, have their own web design language. They do not respect or acknowledge the actual language of traditional web design. Okay, they've got their own proprietary way of doing things. So not only do you have to learn web design, you have to learn the proprietary way that these things do web design. So you have to learn two things on top of CSS, HTML concepts, all of that, right? With Bricks is a page builder that respects the language of traditional web design in the modern era. And so if you understand web design, you understand Bricks naturally. And if you're learning web design, all you have to really do is learn web design, and Bricks will just facilitate the work that you happen to be doing, okay? The idea that, again, my mom with the Bunko Club website, that the block editor is going to make her life somehow easier, that is a false narrative, because it is a proprietary environment that she's going to have to learn, and she's never going to use it to actually assemble a website. The only thing my mom and the average person off the street, I'm just talking about grab a rando off the street and put them in front of WordPress, put them in front of the block editor and see what happens. Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen unless you give them a full done template to start with, and then they can just start editing content and things like that. But they're not going to just start assembling a page with no experience whatsoever, regardless of whether it's in Bricks or the block editor or anything else. They don't even know the first thing, right? So what is the block editor for then? Well, it's for people who want to edit content. That's what it's for. And if you're writing a blog post, by the way, the block editor is fantastic. Block editor is fantastic for writing blog posts. For page assembly, now you take someone like me. Am I going to build a page in Bricks, or am I going to build a page in the block editor? Well, the block editor would slow me down tremendously over what Bricks offers, and I would have to have a ton of workarounds. And someone like you, who let's say you're wanting to learn more about the development. Well, the unfortunate reality of the block editor is that you're going to have to introduce more languages. With Bricks, I tell people HTML, CSS. That's what we need to really get a firm grasp on. Go to the block editor, it's HTML, it's CSS, it's JSON, it's probably some PHP stuff. It's probably, you're not just going to be working in the block editor. You got to understand what VS Code is now. We got to bring a third-party tool into this thing. It's way more. And so if they're talking about making this easier to bring more people in and open this up to more people, that's the opposite is happening in the block editor. The Bricks environment's actually the easier environment to learn in. Because there's less things to worry about. So that's been my argument and I've demonstrated this argument, countless times. So that's what I would say. It's not making it easier on anybody.
I'm just going to say thanks, because you articulated that and explained it really, really well. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
If I go on to the next question, it's going to say, how can you explain to the audience, our listeners, our viewers, what are the critical concepts around this term intrinsic design, and what are your personal views on it being implicated with Gutenberg?
So intrinsic design, I think, is a good concept. It was Jen Simmons?
Yeah, it was Jen Simmons
4 or 5 years ago, something like that. She gave a talk.
One of the lead designers at Apple. I'll be correct about that, would I not?
Yeah. So that talk, from what I remember, and describing the modern era of web design, obviously that's exactly where web design needs to go and needs to be thinking about. And for anybody that isn't familiar with intrinsic design, maybe a good way to explain it, if you think about, obviously we had responsive design, right? So responsive design, which became the norm. It's like, an agency that's like, we build responsive websites. And so it's like, duh. Okay. That's what you're supposed to be doing. It's not like a selling point. Okay. In 2024, but there's a lot of ways to do responsive design. Like you can force design layout changes at different breakpoints. So imagine just a simple H1 heading that's like 80 pixels on desktop. Okay, you want it to be smaller as the device gets smaller. So you might go from breakpoint to breakpoint to breakpoint to breakpoint, changing the font size. Well, congratulations, you made a responsive website, but that's not an intrinsically designed website. So I think intrinsic design takes responsiveness to the next level of almost thinking about automatic responsiveness or fluid responsiveness, where now take a clamp function and apply it to that H1, and there are no breakpoints in play anymore. There's just math that's scaling fluidly that heading down, and it's not breakpoint driven. So I don't really care what the device is. The math is going to math, and it's going to work just fine on any device. That's kind of a very basic way of describing intrinsic design, and that's where we need to go. Now, I think you asked how that relates to the block editor. How that relates to the block editors, the block editor.
Can I just interrupt?
Yeah, go for it.
Because it was one of Adams on his list of problems. It was one of these. He was devastating about how this very excellent idea, this concept, was actually done in WordPress. He was scathing about it, really, wasn't he?
I didn't hear his exact words, but one problem with the implementation of intrinsic design in the block editor I think you could kind of compare this to when Apple decided that nobody needed a headphone jack on phones anymore. So, you know, they like it was early. Let's just say that a lot of people still had cords and they couldn't plug them in, and it created a big hoopla, right? Well, Gutenberg decided that, you know, Jen Simmons made this video on intrinsic design, so nobody needs breakpoints anymore. That was the conclusion that they came to. And so in the block editor, you have no way to do things at different breakpoints. You're forced into the concept of intrinsic design, but you're forced into the concept of intrinsic design too early, okay? We're not there yet. We do still need breakpoints. But again, this is software that's designed for everyone. And so the decision was, well, you know, Kevin's mom making that, she doesn't know what a breakpoint is. She can't deal with those icons up there. That's going to be way too difficult for her. She's going to get all confused. So we're better off just not having them. Well, not having them punishes everybody, just so that we can make my mom, who's never going to build anything in the block editor anyway, because she can't even get started with it. I would have to build it for her and then just let her edit it. And guess what I need in order to really build it for her? I need the breakpoints.
Well,
right?
after watching, sorry to interrupt, but watching Adam's, I'm struggling to find a word to describe his view. But I did some research and I was gobsmacked, absolutely gobsmacked that you're trying to tell people this is a professional level tool, and in mobile design you're giving them no control mechanism. Correct. It's just scandalous, really, and it just really shows to me how out of touch some of the leadership of this project is. Do you think I'm being too scathing there?
No, I don't think so. I don't, you know, notoriously there's a lack of communication. There's a lack of communication before something is developed. There's a lack of communication after something is developed. There's a disconnect, you know, this disconnect exists, by the way, across all tools for the most part. Elementor, Divi, you know, the software developers that build these tools, software development is obviously a very different skill from web development. And so if you have a software developer that doesn't have any experience in web design with web design tools, building a web design tool, if they're not talking to a lot of web designers, there's going to be problems, right? There's going to be problems. And I think that's a big challenge. I think there's a lot of people working on the block editor who don't actually build websites in the real world. And so they're making decisions based on theory and not on actual real world experience. And I don't know if there's enough people correcting them or challenging those theories. They certainly don't ask me much of, like, I've been, you know, outspoken about problems with the block editor. People have said, hey, I will have a discussion with you. I will come on your live stream. I will. But they, you know, we never seem to get it scheduled. And it's just, you know, there's a lack of communication. If we had better communication and they were more open to things that we had to say, but I've always felt like we've been excluded, that they don't care.
Well, I've got my own view about why this is, because I think, and I want to make it clear to the audience, I've got no inside knowledge here. But in most of these situations, based on my experience, it's always financially driven, something that you don't understand. It's either mental illness. If you're in a situation personally or in business and you're in a scenario that doesn't make any sense to you, it's either driven by mental illness or personality disorder, or it's driven by finance. And I think their decisions are driven by finance, because I think Automatic are desperate in some ways of getting this out there, because I think they're bleeding money. I think they're getting through their 900 million runway at such a rate that you would be aghast at, Kevin. I think they're chewing through money at a sizable rate, Kevin.
I don't have access to their financials, so obviously,
well, none of us do.
You know, none of us do. So, you know, we can theorize. You know, I try my best to not ascribe like motive to the decisions that people make. Like, I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I want to assume that they have the best of intentions. I would rather assume that it's a communication problem. I would rather assume that it's a leadership problem that doesn't have any underlying motives or anything like that. You could be absolutely correct, but all we can do is speculate, right? So what I choose to focus on is, what are the actual things that we can see and feel and touch that we have good criticisms and good arguments for. And that's exactly what, we're talking about in these discussions. Those are the details, and those are the things that we can hopefully change, and hopefully change them sooner rather than later.
So we really have covered question 3 in some ways by combining it with 2 to 3, because what you're saying is, I've brought my synopsis of maybe what is driving this deafness to the obvious, as I put it.
Well, let me add to this real quick, because when I talk about the lack of communication, as an example, just to give some examples, right? I had to put a poll on Twitter a year ago asking people if the block editor is a page builder or not a page builder, because I was being told 2 separate things. When I was criticizing it from the perspective of somebody who uses a page builder, what I used to hear is, well, of course, because the block editor is not a page builder. But then I would hear, but we're supposed to build patterns, and we're supposed to add those patterns together. And I'm like, well, what do you get when you add a lot of patterns together? You have a page. It sounds like a page builder to me. And then I put a poll on Twitter, and I said, is the block editor a page builder? And guess what? The WordPress community didn't even know. It was like 44% to 60 or whatever, right? People saying yes, some people saying no. It was like split down the middle. So you can't say that there's really good communication when the ecosystem can't even agree on the fundamental purpose or reality of the tool that we're all discussing, right? And that's something that's so easy to clear up. Intrinsic design. You can't have intrinsic design without a lot of education, okay? You can't go from the days of non-responsive web to responsive web to intrinsic design. And going from responsive to intrinsic is very nuanced. It's not a gigantic leap, okay? So to understand that nuance and to even know,
in some ways, I'm more critical than you. Actually, I just think having on the mobile level, not giving any mechanisms to override.
Correct. Yeah.
I just didn't realise that they were going down this path, and it's bonkers. It's truly bonkers stuff. They don't want to hear. They get resentful. They get malignant. Actually, there's a malignancy about their response. I don't know what drives it, so I presume you don't have all the facts in front of you, because, like I said to you before, based on my personal experience, it's either personality disorder collectively, or it's financially driven and you don't understand, because you don't understand the situation they're facing. But that's my interpretation.
Well, even if it's financially driven, I mean, financially driven to me is like, why are you, if you need to get it out there, if you need to get adoption for it, like, don't make these decisions that don't make sense to anybody. Make the obvious decision of giving people breakpoints, right? If we're just using breakpoints as an example, wouldn't that get it out the door faster? Wouldn't that get people to adopt faster? Literally every third-party tool that I know of that integrates with the block editor added breakpoints. That is a page builder for the block editor. So, it's an obvious missing thing. And like I was about to say, is if you're going to go full intrinsic design, I'm all for, like, guys, we're moving to a different future. And in order to get there, first of all, I'm going to paint the picture of what that future looks like and why it's so much better than the current reality, so that you can buy in. And then I'm going to educate you all the way there to go, guys, we're going to go to intrinsic design. Good luck. And then just take away the breakpoints and then not educate anybody on the tools that are required for intrinsic design, and just kind of leave them hanging inside this thing that they already are mostly objecting to, called the block. I mean, this is just not a winning scenario in any playbook. So we have to go back to basics. Like going back to basics that's the era WordPress is in. If I was going to define it, WordPress is in the go back to basics era. You started as a fantastic CMS. You abandon the CMS, get back to basics, make the CMS amazing in the modern era. Then we can talk about a builder, but we have to have a lot of discussions about what that builder
right. What are we going to do in the second half? Thank you for that, Kevin. That's a good place to end the first half of the show. It's going to be, I think, more... I was going to say that. I think it's been a very constructive discussion. Thank you so much, Kevin. I think you've explained things very coherently. We're going to go for our middle break, folks. We will be back with this ongoing fantastic discussion. We'll be back in a few moments, folks.
Tired of hosting providers that can't handle high traffic loads? Conversio is here to help. Our platform can handle any amount of traffic, all without slowing down or crashing. With immediate Slack support, performance optimization, and a team that thrives on resolving technical challenges, your e-commerce business is in safe hands. Learn more about Conversio at conversio.com.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Lifter LMS, the leading learning management system solution for WordPress. If you or your client are creating any kind of online course, training-based membership website, or any type of e-learning project, Lifter LMS is the most secure, stable, well-supported solution on the market. Go to lifterlms.com and save 20% at checkout with coupon code podcast20. That's podcast20. Enjoy the rest of your show.
We're coming back, folks. Kevin's been a bit more softer around Gutenberg than myself. I've been vicious, haven't I? I've been vicious with some of my whiplashing. It's just wanting the best for WordPress and frustration. And I think it showed really from the response of much more milder people than me, Paul from WP-Tuts, Adam from WP Crafter. When you have such moderate and coherent people attacking quite vehemently, you know something is up, folks. No matter how far you got your head up your rear. On to the next question. So, if you were put in charge of, some people don't like me saying Gutenberg, they say it's WordPress. I see where they come, but I do actually see it as a kind of separate issue because they haven't really done much with the with the basics of the rest of it. All the resources have just gone into this godforsaken project, in my opinion. And that's just frustration. I don't really mean that, because I do honestly think it could be turned around quite rapidly. It might take a year, but it could be turned around quite rapidly. So if you were put in charge and you were willing to do it, Kevin, you were put in charge of this project, what would be the first 2 to 3 things that you would want to implement around this? And be realistic here, Kevin, things that could actually be done in a 6 month to 12-month period that would fundamentally make the scenario better, Kevin.
Well, first of all, to D123's comment down here, you have to call it Gutenberg. It is not WordPress. You know, if you and the block editor is the Gutenberg project. The Gutenberg plugin is ahead of the thing, and you can try out new stuff. But the block editor came from the Gutenberg project. Okay. And if people ask, why is the WordPress CMS so outdated? Well, I can't say because it's WordPress, but what I can say is because of Gutenberg. Right now we know. See, if we talk about them as 2 separate things, because they are 2 separate things, we can actually have a meaningful discussion. They are 2 separate things. And so let's talk about maybe some things that I would do. First of all, I would recommit immediately on day 1 to the CMS. Okay. The content management system is the core of WordPress. There are a lot of problems with the content management system in the modern era. They were fine back when we were in the era of blogging. They're not fine anymore. And nothing has been done to advance this. And so we have to recommit. We're missing core functionality that a modern CMS would have, that we're reliant on plugins for, that we should not be reliant on plugins for. Those things have now proven themselves so valuable that they need to be in core. And so if we recommitted, and by the way, let's go back to the number one selling point of WordPress, and this is WordPress.org, the open source software that we all know and love. Open source is the number one selling feature. It is the number one benefit, owning your data, not being beholden to anybody else, the freedom to publish, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's the biggest selling point. Well, guess what? We need to do that really, really, really well. We need a really great CMS, okay? Because that's where our data lives. So let's recommit to the CMS. That's step one, day one. And I think that makes everybody happy. I think because everybody that uses WordPress needs WordPress to be a better CMS. I've talked very lately on my channel. I've done in-depth videos on URL architecture and the problems with how archaic the CMS is when it comes to segmenting your content out, relating your content to other content. We're living in 2007 instead of 2024 with the CMS. Recommitting the CMS would make everybody happy. That would be step one. Step two, I would say that the block editor, it is an experimental editor. Okay, so when D123 says that Gutenberg is an experiment, that is 100% fact. It is an experiment. It is a completely new way of doing things. It is a completely proprietary way of doing things. It is not proven. Okay, I would immediately on day one make that opt-in. It needs to go back to being a plugin, okay? WordPress is a CMS. If you love the block editor and you want to bolt it on, go ahead and bolt it on. But we're not going to force it down your throat in the current state that it's in. It's not fair. It's not ready. It's not any of the things that it needs to be to force it on 40% of the internet, okay? People can opt into it when it's a standalone plugin, and then we'll really see, that's actually market competition. Let's see what happens with it, right? We know that a lot of people opt out of it. There is a plugin where you can opt out, and we know it's insanely popular for a reason, okay? So I would do that. What would the third thing be? I would open all lines of communication. So if I'm going to start building an editor of any kind, I'm bringing in agency owners, I'm bringing in freelancers, I'm bringing in my mom, I'm bringing in anybody that's going to use this thing so that we can actually have a real understanding of what their needs are and how practical it is. And then we're going to put a strategy together because there are two fundamental ways to do this. You can start from a beginner, and then you can try to build advanced features in. That's what the block editor does. I think that's a losing strategy. I think it's proven to be a losing strategy. It's much easier to start with the advanced tool and then hide all the stuff that confuses a beginner. Okay, you work backwards. And by the way, if we look at why is WordPress so popular, it's the people that are actually doing all the work in WordPress, building the sites for people that make it popular. Okay. It was the page builders that came along and opened the door to, guess what? WordPress doesn't just have to be a blog anymore. Look at all the stuff you could do with these page builders, okay? The Elementors, the Divies, as much as I rag on them, they're one of the big reasons why WordPress spread like wildfire, okay? So we have to give professionals, the people who know and love the work and know the language of web design, the tools they need to do this work the best possible way, the scalable way, the maintainable way, the accessible way. Give them the tools that they need. And then when a person like my mom comes in and just needs to edit content, that is the easily solvable challenge. The easiest challenge to solve is, how do I make it easy for her to come in and edit something that somebody else already did? That is not a hard problem to solve, okay? But it is a very hard problem to make an entire interface for my mom that then a professional can come in and feels at home with.
Yeah, I can't argue. Honestly, I can't really argue with anything you really outlined, really. It just seems pretty much common sense to me. But unfortunately, there are people and forces in the WordPress community that are not having it. Over to you, Kurt.
No, and I just want to comment. That was a really great way to phrase all that, especially the part about the open communication. I've worked in multiple industries. Jonathan will tell you I've had way too many jobs in my life. And every time I have the aspiration of getting to the top, getting to, the crystal office up top, I'm amazed when you finally get there. You think they have all the wisdom about whatever their industry or their vertical is, and that's when you find out they've never been boots on the ground. They've never run the cash register at a retail store. They've never greeted a customer in a service aisle. They've never, and so they're making all these programs and rules, but they don't have any clue as to how it works in the field. And you can see that, like this WordPress 6.6, to Jonathan's point, people that I've never seen be negative before just jumped out on YouTube and started saying horrendous things. And I was like, wow, I think the straw's finally broken this camel's back. I think people have finally had it.
Well, I think they have. I think reasonable people have just had enough of this propaganda bullshit that comes from a certain group of people in the WordPress community. They just had a stomach full of it. Really,
well, I've had a lot of conversations with people, and I've kind of gotten the profile down of the people who really love the block editor, and that profile is people who live in VS Code. They're building custom blocks, and they're very comfortable in React and PHP and all of these various languages. And like I said, go back to the Elementor crowd, the Divi crowds, the page builders that really helped WordPress spread like wildfire. The people using these tools don't live in that world, right? And the block editor says, hey, we're for everybody. If you're for everybody, why the people who love it the most spend all their time in VS Code, not the block editor? This fundamental disconnects. And if we're talking about not talking to people in the field, like Kurt was mentioning, go back to the breakpoints thing. If you were sitting in a room, okay, I have a full development team. We're constantly having conversations about features in automatic CSS, features in frames, in our upcoming Etch product. These are going to be used by lots and lots and lots of people, okay? If you have something like breakpoints, somebody says, guys, there's this thing called intrinsic design. That's where things are moving. I think we should get rid of the breakpoints. They're all going to have a debate about that. They should have a debate about that. And these should be people that actually build websites. And with something like breakpoints, I can guarantee you it wouldn't take 30 seconds to come to the conclusion that we can't just remove the breakpoints. And somebody would make an argument and say, but it's going to confuse Kevin's mom. She's not going to know what the breakpoints are, and she's going to have a bad experience. They're like, they have to be there. We're not there yet. They have to be there. And by the way,
but it's even worse than that, really, Kevin, because they come out with this ridiculous argument that it's going to be run by committee, allowing a period of open discussion, allow people from the community to have input, and then have a smaller group that actually looks at input and comes with a strategy and plan and says this is where we're going, and then publish it with logical arguments why this is the best. That's an adult way of running things. That's not committee, is it?
Well, are you saying that it's done by committee and that's why we have what we have?
We don't even know how it's
right. We don't. There's not a lot.
We don't even know how it's run because it's all smoke and mirrors, isn't it?
Well, what I would guess, the experience that I have is a committee did not come to the conclusion that the breakpoint should not be in the block editor. That is a decision that was made by a single person, most likely overriding what other people were saying about the presence of breakpoints in the block editor. Because any committee that spent any time building websites, that's the first thing you need, right? And so the idea of removing it would be no small task. And anybody on that committee would say, if we do remove it, there has to be mass education as to why we're removing it, what the vision is, and how we're going to build websites without these things. And everybody's going to wonder where they are at all times. It's going to be a constant PR nightmare, right? So it's not, that's a huge decision. And to me, there was a committee, probably all that stuff was talked about, and somebody overrode, essentially just, put their foot down and said, nope, it's not going to have it. Let's move forward, figure it out.
Rightio. I don't think we need to go to question 5 because I think you've made some of your thoughts about AI when it comes to web design.
we can go into AI.
Bon?
We can go into AI. You want to go?
I'm going to throw it over to Kirk. You would have put it.
He leaves it to me. So if we just touch on the AI thing, just from a standpoint, like when it first came out, I was not a fan. And then Jonathan glossed me over to a couple of tools, and then other people glossed me over to a couple of tools, and I could see where there was productivity helps.
Yeah.
But I still believe it only augments a professional's work. It's not replacing the professional.
Yeah.
And I'm having issues with people, like your point at the beginning of the show, hit our AI generator and generate a site, in 5 minutes. And you're like, no, like I actually did it with Cadence's AI site builder thing. And it built a construction website quickly, but it was nothing that could be used. It was placeholder content, but it wasn't stuff that could be really used.
Well, there's nothing wrong with placeholder content, is there, to some degree? It helps a bit, doesn't it? It just... I totally agree with your statement. I'm sorry to interrupt, Kevin. I've been doing that a little bit, haven't I? Well, I think I've been constructive with my little things, haven't I, Kevin? You seem to... He'd sort me out if he wasn't happy, folks. He'd get hold of me and smack me around quite easily. So what's your... I think what Kirk said, Kevin, is totally logical. What's your own thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's an augmenting tool right now. That's the best way to use it. It's not where it needs to be to one click, do what you're asking. Hey, make me a mechanics website, and it's got to have these pages, and I really wanted to convert to this offer right here, and then poof, it appears, right? It could get to that one day. It could,
like me, Kevin. I go poof.
Yeah, we don't have a crystal ball. I can tell you it's not there right now, right? And there's going to be a progression in getting there. And what I'm trying to communicate to developers and designers and people who consider themselves to be a professional in this industry is that the lower level projects you do, the lower level work that you do, the less technical the work is, the less you have a marketer's mind. If you can't help your client understand how their website fits into a bigger picture of generating traffic and sales and leads and attention and on and on and on, you are going to get replaced first. Okay. So that is, I think, one thing that's undeniable about AI. Just like, I ask people about blogging. Hey, can AI produce a blog article? And they'll say, well, it's about BuzzFeed level blog quality, right? Okay, well, good. All the BuzzFeed article writers, we don't need them anymore, do we? So they're low level writers. They're not quality writers. They got replaced first. So
you're talking about the chocolate factory here, also. You mentioned the chocolate factory here, Kevin, in your criticism.
So that's all I'm trying to get as far as a point is you don't want to be the person doing low level work in the modern era, in the AI era, because you will get replaced first. There is some things I think that AI just can't ever do. In terms of, for example, understanding.
Well, when it does, we got bigger worries, haven't we?
That's correct. Yeah. When it really can start mapping human feelings and we've
got some slight other problems. And web design ain't going to be one of them, is it?
Exactly. Yeah. So when we get there, we'll cross that bridge. Right now, it's mostly income.
Good old Elon's already planning our total redundancy, isn't he? He's got his ticket to Mars, hasn't he?
Yeah, even with AI, I'd have to tell the AI, well, I mean, I want you, because I want to be able to maintain the site.
We're not the chosen ones, Kevin. We're just workers, mate. We're not the chosen one for the Starship to Mars, are we? We are unworthy to spread our genetic seed any further, aren't we, Kevin? This
is taking a turn.
This is the English sarcasm coming out. Sorry, I went off the thing. Yeah, I see where you're going. So let's go to last. So if you had, I think we asked you, but if you had your own time machine, H.G. Wells or the TARDIS, Doctor Who, you could go back and just tell yourself one little thing, one little tip to the younger Kevin. Is there any kind of little whisper, little tip? Does it have to be something really mind-blowing? But maybe you could. Anything you want to tell yourself? Like, don't come on this show?
No. I would just say in general, go bigger, go faster, right? I've tended in the past to, I feel like I haven't gone at the pace that I could be going at. And for various reasons.
I'm a very slow learner myself, but I get there at the end. Kirk will testify. I'm a plodder at heart, really.
Yep.
I've accepted it, though, Kevin. I'm a plodder.
That's all right. Hey, some people prefer the pace, you know?
Yeah, I don't give up much, though, do I? Would you agree with that, Kurt?
A little on the tenacious side.
Yeah, I am tenacious, but, you know, which is
I
good
like
or
Matt's
bad,
one.
isn't it? All right, I think we're going to end it now. We've given Gutenberg a good kicking, haven't we, Kevin? You know, kicked it around the place.
Same time next month, same date.
They won't listen. But just to finish off, I don't think they're giving up on it. They're on this 10-year plan that seemed to come from nowhere. Nobody told me that we'd be on a 10-year march on a software project that should have been done in a year or less.
10 years is a very long. It's a very long time. A lot changes.
That's
in
one
10
of the
years
most
on internet.
ridiculous statements that's ever been told to me on my show. When that came
Kind of like
out,
100-year hosting plan. You know, if we're being honest.
you got a worrying insight there, but I don't want to go there too much, and that's even me saying that. Well, it's kind of linked to yeah. Let's not go there. That's too personal. But you know, I think you gave your 3 steps here, but my take on it is, I think all the things you outline I would agree with, but a more gradual thing would be not one more fundamental change to it for the next 6 months, and a public statement that we're going to have a review, and in the meantime we're going to deal with some of the painful UX and usability problems. But I'm not even sure, based on your input, which I'm going to have to think of if that's possible, it might need a really just, this has gone wrong, we need to turn it around, we need to fundamentally change the whole outlook of this project, because just adding more and more functionality to it is not the answer. I think both of us would agree with that. Would you agree with that?
I would.
Right, Kevin, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and your views and ideas, Kevin?
Yeah, just go to Geary, that's GEARY.co. That's pretty much my central hub. You'll find everything there.
Because my dad told me the one thing with dealing with a problem, Jonathan, the first thing you've got to do is stop digging, Jonathan. The first thing of dealing with a fundamental problem, folks, is to stop digging your own grave. That's 101 of problem solving. Stop digging, and then you can then work out a plan of action. But you got to stop digging.
Yep.
Kurt, what is the best way for people to find out more about you?
Well, Mañana No Mas is the name of the agency, and just about everything online leads to me. That's Mañana No Mas. And then LinkedIn. I'm always active on LinkedIn. I'm on there every day. And before we end the show, I just want to point viewers and listeners to Kevin Geary's YouTube channel. As someone that does a lot of adult education, Kevin, your Page Builder 101 course is communicated really well. So for people that are looking to up their game, I want to encourage people to check that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Kevin's passionate. He wants the best for WordPress, and he's an extremely good educator. And these are not easy discussions. There is no right and wrong here. But people need to be honest and have a respectful and semi-passionate, because we all want the best for WordPress, don't we not? We will be back next week with another fantastic discussion, folks, with a great guest. We'll see you soon. Bye.